What is a dollar? Most people would answer that it is something that looks like this. This is a picture of a $1 Federal Reserve note. We recognize this as a dollar. After all, it says $1 on it. Here is another dollar. It doesn't look like the previous dollar. However, the United States government declares that it's a dollar too. Here is another dollar. This one looks similar to the previous dollar, but not exactly the same. Now let's look at one more dollar. This one looks similar to the last $2, but again, it's slightly different. All $4, even though they are all made out of different materials of differing values, are declared by the U.S. government to be a dollar and forms of U.S. money. The Minneapolis Federal Reserve Bank defines money as an item or commodity that is agreed to be accepted in trade. So, in this slide, what is being traded are paper notes and coins. But what exactly does it mean that they are dollars? The U.S. Code states, United States money is expressed in dollars, dimes, or tenths, cents, or hundredths, and mils or thousandths. According to the U.S. Code, a dollar is what money is expressed in. In other words, it is a unit of money. However, if this is true, then we must then ask, what exactly is the money a dollar expresses? This question is not so easily answered. Let's take a deeper look at the United States dollar and try to determine what kind of money the dollar represents. What we find out will give us a deeper understanding of our money and the monetary policy of the United States. This dollar, a piece of paper imprinted with different colors of ink, has a number of unique characteristics. First, obviously, it is designated as $1. Second, these notes are printed by the United States Treasury and authorized by the Secretary of the Treasury. Third, what we call a dollar is designated as legal tender for all debts, public and private. This means that the dollar has to be accepted by everyone for all debts public and private, unless of course it was contracted beforehand that the debt would be paid in something else, such as with a credit card, check, or even bitcoins. Fourth, it is a Federal Reserve note. This means that it is issued by the Federal Reserve Banks of the United States. These are the regional banks of the Federal Reserve System, the central banking system of the United States. The fact that the dollar is a note means that it is really a liability of the Federal Reserve Banks and an obligation of the United States. This means that a dollar note is a promise to pay or an IOU issued by the Federal Reserve Bank to the holder of the note, the public. The U.S. government ultimately guarantees the repayment of the loan. Why does the U.S. government guarantee the note? Because it's a law. The U.S. Code states, the said notes shall be obligations of the United States and shall be receivable by all national and member banks and Federal Reserve banks and for all taxes, customs, and other public dues. They shall be redeemed in lawful money on demand at the Treasury Department of the United States in the City of Washington, District of Columbia, or at any Federal Reserve Bank. Notice that the code says, they shall be redeemed in lawful money on demand. Now this raises a number of questions. First, if the dollar note shall be redeemed in lawful money on demand, is the note itself lawful money? Second, if we bring the dollar to a Federal Reserve Bank or the U.S. Treasury, what kind of lawful money would we receive as redemption for the dollar? Let's take a look at the Federal Reserve dollar in relation to other U.S. money to see if we can answer these questions. Let's say we were to take our $1 Federal Reserve note to a Federal Reserve Bank or to the U.S. Treasury for redemption. What would we receive? We would probably receive 100 pennies, or perhaps 20 nickels, or 10 dimes, or 4 quarters, or maybe we could get one of these Sacagawea dollars. These coins might be what the U.S. Code means when it speaks of lawful money. but the US Code is not specific on the matter. However, let's consider this US money for a minute. If we exchange our paper dollar for one Sacagawea dollar, we could say our paper dollar is equal to one Sacagawea dollar, and one Sacagawea dollar is equal to one paper dollar or Federal Reserve note. That seems simple enough, but things get a little more complicated. This Sacagawea $1 coin issued by the U.S. Mint designated as $1 contains 88.5% copper, 6% zinc, 3.5% manganese, and 2% nickel. All these elements are considered base metals. If we took this dollar to the United States Treasury or a Federal Reserve Bank, they would, unfortunately, not redeem it for this dollar. Why not? It's a dollar, isn't it? Let's compare the two dollars. The Sacagawea dollar is composed of base metals. The American Eagle silver dollar, on the other hand, contains about 1 ounce of fine silver. Silver is considered a precious metal. Now consider this. If pizza costs $1, we could buy one piece of pizza with one Sacagawea dollar. If we brought the $1 American Silver Eagle to the pizza place, we could also buy one slice of pizza. The pizza man would probably be more than happy to comply. Why? Because if we were to bring our coin to a coin dealer, he would offer us about 20 Federal Reserve dollar notes in return for it. We could then purchase not one but 20 pieces of pizza. The $1 Silver Eagle, in reality, has a 20 times greater purchasing power than a $1 Federal Reserve note and one Sacagawea dollar. Now, since the $1 Silver Eagle has a different purchasing power than the $1 Federal Reserve note and the $1 Sacagawea dollar, are they all the same dollar? Let's consider another American coin. This is a United States $5 coin. How much pizza could this coin buy? Logically, we would assume that since $1 bought one slice, $5 should buy 5 slices. But that would not be the smart thing to do. This $5 coin is made out of 1/10 ounce of fine gold. We could take this coin to a coin dealer and probably receive around 135 Federal Reserve notes for it. Dollar for dollar, it would buy 27 times more pizza than a $1 Sacagawea coin and a $1 Federal Reserve note. This means that in the free market, not all dollars are created equal. The term dollar evidently varies from coin to coin and from coins to notes. This raises a series of important questions. If the term dollar is an expression of money, what exactly is the correlation between a dollar and the money it expresses? What exactly is the money that the dollar signifies? And can we know the value of a dollar or the value of the money it represents? Let's take a look at history to see if we can discover what a dollar really is. There are 2 places in the United States Constitution where the term dollar is mentioned. Both have important implications for our understanding of the dollar. The first is found in Article 1, Section 9, Clause 1. The clause states, "The migration or importation of such persons as any of the states now existing shall think proper to admit shall not be prohibited by the Congress prior to the year 1808, but a tax or duty may be imposed on such importation, not exceeding $10 for each person." This clause has reference to the slave trade. Prior to 1808, if a slave was imported into the United States, the Constitution authorized the federal government to place a tax on the importer not to exceed $10. Constitutional scholars see this clause as a compromise between anti- and pro-slavery factions in order to get the Constitution passed. However, in order for this clause to make sense, the meaning of the $10 identified as the tax had to have a known fixed value. This is why. If the value of a dollar was not fixed, Future anti-slavery factions within Congress could attempt to manipulate monetary policy in order to change the purchasing power of the dollar so as to make it more difficult to pay the fixed tax. This would decrease the profitability of the slave trade and perhaps eliminate it altogether before 1808. If this were possible, it is doubtful that pro-slavery states would have agreed to the clause and the ratification of the Constitution. Therefore, the framers of the Constitution knew exactly what a dollar was and that its value was fixed. The second place where dollars are mentioned in the U.S. Constitution is in the Seventh Amendment. It states, "In suits at common law, where the value in controversy shall exceed $20, the right of trial by jury shall be preserved." Again, if the value of a dollar was not fixed, Congress could manipulate the dollar so as to eliminate common law jury trials altogether. Obviously, those groups in favor of jury trials knew this and would not have voted for ratification on this basis. If the value of a dollar was not fixed, but could fluctuate according to government policy, neither the Seventh Amendment nor Article 1, Section 9, Clause 1 would have any relevancy to the future, nor would they have ever been included in the Constitution in their present form. Therefore, at the time of the ratification of the Constitution, $10 and $20 had known fixed values independent of what Congress said the value of a dollar was. Interestingly, since the U.S. Mint would not be established until 1792, there was, as of yet, no official U.S. coins. So, when the U.S. Constitution referred to dollars, what exactly was the fixed value, and how was it determined? Let's take a look a little further back in history. In 1776, shortly after the signing of the Declaration of Independence, the Continental Congress began to address the issue of a metal coinage system. Apparently, in the 1770s, there were multiple international coins of differing weights and fineness of silver circulating throughout the states. On September 2nd, a committee of Congress recommended that the Spanish milled dollar become the standard of measurement for other coins. The committee wrote, "By declaring the precise weight and fineness of the Spanish milled dollar now becoming the money unit or common measure of other coins in these states, and by explaining the principles and establishing the rules by which the said common measure shall be applied to other coins in order to determine their comparative value." The Constitutional Committee recognized that the Spanish dollar had already been accepted by the individual states as the common standard for determining the value of all other coins. Thus, it recommended that the United States government should do so as well. The Spanish milled dollar was a silver coin minted in the Spanish Empire worth 8 reales. By 1776, because of its uniformity and standard in milling, the Spanish dollar had become an international currency and the dominant specie coin circulating in America. The word dollar was thought to have evolved from the German Taler, which was similar in size to the Spanish dollar. The Spanish dollar had a weight of approximately 387 grains of fine silver. It was also known as the piece of 8, because it was often divided into 8 parts or bits. From the 16th to 19th centuries, it was thought to be the most stable and least debased coin in the world. Prior to the ratification of the U.S. Constitution, the United States also experimented with a paper currency as a medium of exchange. This paper money, known as bills of credit or continental dollars, was issued from 1775 to 1779. These bills were usually denominated in dollars and could be passed from person to person with payment due to the bearer. There was usually no interest paid on them. Interestingly, the bills were often payable in Spanish milled dollars. A typical bill read, "The bearer is entitled to receive 55 Spanish milled dollars or an equal sum in gold or silver according to a resolution of Congress." This meant that bills of credit were really a promise to pay in gold or silver, with the Spanish dollar as the measurement of a dollar. In order for the bill of credit to be defined, it had to correspond to a real asset that had value. By 1781, the continental dollar eventually depreciated to zero value. There were several reasons. First, neither the individual states nor the United States government accepted the paper dollars for taxes or government dues. Second, Congress could not impose a tax to pay off the redemption value. Third, the states refused to supply specie to the federal government in order to redeem them. Fourth, there were vastly too many printed. Fifth, the British counterfeited the dollar as a means of economic warfare. Because of their negative experiences with a paper currency, the framers of the Constitution deliberately restricted the individual states and Congress from issuing bills of credit. Following the adoption of the Articles of Confederation on March 1, 1781, the United States earnestly began to seek a monetary system. In his letter to Congress on January 15, 1782, Robert Morris, Superintendent of the Office of Finance, commented that the various coins which have circulated in America have undergone different changes in their value, so that there is hardly any which can be considered as a general standard, unless it be Spanish dollars. Morris here recognizes that there have been multiple coins circulating with changing values, and suggests that the Spanish dollar be the standard to judge other coins. On January 30, 1784, Thomas Jefferson, in his Plan on Money, echoed Morris's view on the Spanish dollar, but took it a step further. The money unit of these states shall be equal in value to a Spanish milled dollar, containing so much fine silver as the assay, before directed, shall show to be contained, on an average, in dollars of the several dates in circulation with us. Jefferson was extremely clear. The money unit of the United States should be equal to the Spanish dollar. He suggested that various coins be assayed to determine an average of fine silver contained in the coins. He made an important observation on the Spanish dollar later in 1784, when he stated, "Taking into our view all money transactions great and small, I question if a common measure, of more convenient size than the dollar, could be proposed. The unit or dollar is a known coin, and the most familiar of all to the minds of people. It is already adopted from south to north, has identified our currency, and therefore happily offers itself as a unit already introduced." According to Thomas Jefferson, no better money standard was available than the Spanish dollar. Interestingly, he noted that the government did not have to mandate this. The market had already adopted it. On April 8, 1786, the Board of Treasury reported to Congress on the establishment of a mint and advised that the money unit or dollar will contain 375 grains and 64 hundredths of a grain of fine silver. A dollar containing this number of grains of fine silver will be worth as much as the new Spanish dollars. Then on August 8, 1787, Congress made its determination on the dollar. It resolved that the money unit of the United States, being by the resolve of Congress of the 6th July, 1785, a dollar shall contain of fine silver 375 grains and 64 hundredths of a grain. On the eve of the ratification of the U.S. Constitution, the Continental Congress was not confused on what money or a dollar was. The dollar was a coin with a fixed weight and fineness of silver, equal to the Spanish dollar of the time. Following the ratification of the Constitution, the Secretary of the Treasury, Alexander Hamilton, was directed to report on the establishment of a mint. In his January 28, 1791 report, Hamilton suggested that the unit in coins of the United States ought to correspond with 24 grains and 3/4 grains of pure gold, and with 371 grains and 1/4 grain of fine silver, each answering to a dollar in the money of account. While Hamilton suggested slightly reducing the amount of grains in a silver dollar, he still understood that a dollar was defined as a specific metal of a specific weight and fineness. He gave this important admonition in the report. There is scarcely any point in the economy of national affairs of greater moment than the uniform preservation of the intrinsic value of the money unit. On this, the security and steady value of property essentially depend. Hamilton seems to have understood that if the value of the money unit was uncertain, then the security and value of all property was also uncertain. On April 2, 1792, President Washington signed the Coinage Act of 1792. It embodied the coinage principles espoused by the Continental Congress, Jefferson, Hamilton, and the United States Constitution. It mandated that the money of account of the United States shall be expressed in dollars or units, and that the dollars or units, each to be of the value of a Spanish milled dollar as the same is now current, and to contain 371 grains and 4/16 parts of a grain of pure or 416 grains of standard silver. Interestingly, the act also allowed the public to bring gold and silver bullion to the mint to be coined free of expense. Obviously, Congress did not assume a monopoly on the money supply. The act also established the penalty of death for the crime of debasing the coinage. Inflation was severely dealt with. From these observations, we can draw the following conclusions. First, at the time of the adoption of the Constitution, the framers and the Continental Congress recognized that the Spanish dollar was the money standard. Second, governments did not authorize the Spanish dollar as money. They simply recognized what the market had used for decades. Third, the market determined the value of a dollar according to its silver content. Fourth, the U.S. government determined that the U.S. dollar coin would correspond to a similar weight and fineness of the Spanish silver dollar. Fifth, the Coinage Act of 1792 defines the dollar as the value of a Spanish milled dollar as the same as is now current. Sixth, this is the dollar referred to in the U.S. Constitution. Seventh, the dollar designated in the Constitution existed before the Coinage Act of 1792 and before the Constitution was ratified. The general belief that a dollar corresponded to a fixed amount of silver would remain until Congress enacted the Legal Tender Acts during the Civil War. Up until 1862, gold, silver, and copper coins were the only money issued by the federal government. There was no paper currency issued. This was in keeping with Article 1, Section 8, Clause 5 of the U.S. Constitution, which states, "The Congress shall have power to coin money, regulate the value thereof, and of foreign coin." However, with the onset of the Civil War, the Union found itself desperately short of the necessary funds needed to continue the conflict. One response was to pass the first legal tender bill. On February 25, 1862, Abraham Lincoln signed the bill into law. This act allowed the federal government to issue $150 million in irredeemable United States notes. Because of their green color, they were also known as greenbacks. These notes were backed only by the credit of the United States government. In essence, they were a fiat currency, unbacked by gold or silver bullion. The notes were also mandated as a legal tender for all debts public and private within the United States. This meant that the notes, by law, had to be accepted by everyone within the country as payment for debts. The passage of this act allowed the United States government, for the first time since the adoption of the Constitution, to institute a paper money supply and also to designate as a dollar something that did not contain 371 grains and 4/16 parts of a grain of fine silver. During the congressional debate over the bill, Owen Lovejoy, representative from Ohio, offered an insightful perspective on United States money. He stated, "It is not in the power of Congress to accomplish an impossibility in making something out of nothing. The piece of paper you stamp as $5 is not $5, and it will never be, unless it is convertible into a $5 gold piece, and to profess it is simply a delusion and fallacy. In Lovejoy's opinion, in order for a dollar to be a dollar, it had to be convertible into a precious metal. He believed Congress's attempt to call an irredeemable piece of paper a dollar was simply delusional. Since the Constitution assumed a dollar to be equal to the Spanish dollar, and the Coinage Act of 1792 referred to the dollar as the same silver weight as a Spanish dollar, the greenback did not meet the legal definition of a dollar. A total of $450 million of greenbacks were eventually printed, with a total of $415 million issued. On July 11, 1864, greenbacks in terms of the value of gold fell to a low point of only 35 cents worth of gold. In the free market, a $1 U.S. note did not equal a $1 U.S. gold coin. Other effects were predictable. By 1865, prices had increased about 80%, while real wages declined about 20%. After the Civil War, there were several Supreme Court challenges to the legal tender acts. However, in 1871, in the case of Knox v. Lee, the Supreme Court ruled that a paper currency not backed by gold or silver was constitutional. Following the Civil War, gold coins continued to be issued by the federal government. However, silver coinage was suspended in 1873, though resumed in 1878. On January 15, 1875, Congress passed the Specie Payment Resumption Act. This act authorized the Secretary of the Treasury to redeem outstanding greenbacks, or U.S. notes, in gold specie on demand, on or after January 1, 1879. This seems to have restored confidence in U.S. notes, and by 1878 they were once again trading at par with gold. A $1 U.S. note was again equal to $1 in specie. On May 31, 1878, the total amount of U.S. notes was fixed at $346,681,016. This, in essence, permanently ended the power of the Treasury to directly create new fiat paper money. These notes are still legal tender in the United States. However, in 1994, legislation was passed to decrease the amount in circulation. Beginning in 1878, the United States government, in response to political forces calling for an increase in the money supply, began issuing silver certificates. These certificates could be exchanged for silver coins on demand. These silver dollars contain 371.25 grains of fine silver, the constitutional definition of a dollar. The federal government also issued gold certificates from 1865 to 1934. However, this type of paper money was not generally intended for circulation to the public. Interestingly, United States government-issued currency was not the predominant currency circulating in the United States after the Civil War. The U.S. National Banking Acts of 1863 and 1864 established the groundwork for a network of federally chartered national banks. Under this law, banks could apply for a national charter as long as they could meet the necessary minimum capital requirement. Once accepted, the banks were required to purchase interest-bearing U.S. government bonds in the amount of 1/3 of its paid-in capital. The act then allowed banks to issue banknotes up to 90% of the amount of government bonds it purchased. Though the U.S. government printed the notes, they bore the name of the issuing bank and the signatures of the bank's officers. The national banknotes were considered legal tender and could be used to pay all federal taxes except customs duties. Technically, the notes could be redeemed at the issuing bank for silver or gold. If the bank could not redeem the notes, the federal government could sell the insolvent bank's bonds and pay off the bearer of the note. On March 3, 1865, the federal government imposed a tax of 10% on the notes of state banks to take effect on July 1, 1866. This tax eventually forced all non-federal currency out of circulation. These notes would remain in circulation until the 1930s. In 1914, after the formation of the Federal Reserve System, the Federal Reserve banks began issuing Federal Reserve notes. These notes were redeemable in gold on demand at the U.S. Treasury or in gold or lawful money at any Federal Reserve bank. It was clear that these notes were interchangeable with specie. In 1914, a $1 Federal Reserve note equaled $1 in specie. However, on March 9, 1933, Congress passed the Emergency Banking Act of 1933. It stated, "The Secretary of the Treasury, in his discretion, may require any or all individuals, partnerships, associations, and corporations to pay and deliver to the Treasurer of the United States any or all gold coin, gold bullion, and gold certificates owned by such individuals, partnerships, associations, and corporations. Upon receipt of such gold coin, gold bullion, or gold certificates, the Secretary of the Treasury shall pay therefor an equivalent amount of any other form of coin or currency coined or issued under the laws of the United States." This law removed the gold obligation and authorized the Treasury to satisfy redemption demands with other forms of coins or current legal notes of equal face value. Subsequently, on April 5, 1933, President Roosevelt issued Executive Order 6102. This order criminalized the public possession of gold coins, thus ending the circulation of gold specie money. By 1934, most circulating currency notes were beginning to be consolidated into Federal Reserve notes. After 1934, the notes carried the inscription, "This note is redeemable in lawful money at the United States Treasury or at any Federal Reserve bank." Since silver coins were in circulation, the notes could be redeemed in silver. Starting with Series 1963, the words, "will pay to the bearer on demand," no longer appear, and each Federal Reserve note simply states a particular denomination in dollars. With Series 1963, the promise of redemption also vanished from the face of each note. On June 24, 1968, the U.S. Treasury stopped redeeming silver certificates in silver bullion. By 1970, silver was removed from the production of coins. On August 15, 1971, President Nixon directed Treasury Secretary Connally to suspend, with certain exceptions, the convertibility of the dollar into gold or other reserve assets, ordering the gold window to be closed such that foreign governments could no longer exchange their dollars for gold. Thus, on their face, Federal Reserve notes became, in the description of John Exter, a former member of the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System, paper IOU nothing currency. As we have seen, the currency we use today, the Federal Reserve note, may be designated a dollar, but it is not what a dollar has historically been defined as, nor is it what the Constitution assumed a dollar to be. Essentially, Federal Reserve notes are a fiat currency, redeemable for nothing. They are basically, in the words of economist Guido Hülsmann, legal tender paper slips. The implications of this are significant. A dollar that contains 371.25 grains of fine silver cannot be reduced in value below the market exchange value of silver for other commodities. However, a dollar that contains no fixed amount of any particular substance per dollar can theoretically be reduced in value infinitely. Therefore, since the Federal Reserve Bank, under the authority of the federal government, can print an unlimited amount of fiat dollars ex nihilo, it can, if desired, inflate the money supply and thus reduce the purchasing power of the dollar. Former Federal Reserve Chairman Ben Bernanke has stated as much. Like gold, U.S. dollars have value only to the extent that they are strictly limited in supply. But the US government has a technology called a printing press, or today its electronic equivalent, that allows it to produce as many US dollars as it wishes at essentially no cost. By increasing the number of US dollars in circulation, the US government can also reduce the value of a dollar in terms of goods and services, which is equivalent to raising the prices in dollars of those goods and services. We conclude that under a paper money system, a determined government can always generate higher spending and hence positive inflation. In response to government-engineered inflation, economist Murray Rothbard wrote this: "But if government manages to establish paper tickets or bank credit as money, as equivalent to gold grams or ounces, then the government, as dominant money supplier, becomes free to create money costlessly and at will. As a result, this inflation of the money supply destroys the value of the dollar, drives up prices, cripples economic calculation, and hobbles and seriously damages the workings of the market economy. The natural tendency of government, once in charge of money, is to inflate and to destroy the value of the currency." Let's consider these two graphs. The first is the money supply of the United States between 1918 and 2003. We can see it has risen considerably. The next is the purchasing power of the dollar since 1913. According to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, the dollar has lost 95% of its purchasing power since 1913. Bernanke was correct concerning the power of the government to cause inflation, and Rothbard was correct in the direction it would ultimately take. Let's consider the Federal Reserve dollar in relation to federal government fiscal policy. Holzman observes, "The most visible consequence of the paper money inflation of the past 30 years may be the explosion of public debt. In the private sector, a person's ability to borrow is limited by his present assets and by his expected revenue. In the public sector, a government's ability to borrow is limited by its present resources and its revenue from future taxation. However, with the presence of a central bank, such as the Federal Reserve Bank, the situation has changed. Since the bank has a quasi-governmental status, it has certain loyalties to the federal government. The federal government can now rely on the bank, the primary money producer in the country, for unlimited credit. The problem is that the federal government can obtain credit far in excess of its current assets and expected revenue from taxation. Often, the federal government's debt burden can grow faster than the production of money. Consider the following chart. In 1960, the federal debt was less than 2 times the money supply. In 2013, it grew to almost 7 times the money supply. In essence, the inflation of the money supply has become a hidden tax on the public. And since there is nothing to constrain depreciation of the dollar, the government has a virtually unlimited power to tax without voter approval. Interestingly, the only check on unlimited money printing by the central bank would be the possibility of a hyperinflationary scenario. Thus far, no major currency has experienced this, nor does it seem imminent in the near future. Economist F.A. Hayek concludes, "What is so dangerous and ought to be done away with is not government's right to issue money, but the exclusive right to do so, and their power to force people to use it and to accept it at a particular price. But there is no reason whatever why people should not be free to make contracts, including ordinary purchases and sales, in any kind of money they choose, or why they should be obliged to sell against any particular kind of money. There could be no more effective check against the abuse of money by the government than if people were free to refuse any money they distrusted and to prefer money in which they had confidence."